Hi there. In this video, we will discuss the summary of each chapter of Florante et Laura, from chapter 1 to chapter 30. Let's begin. To Celia. The poem To Celia expresses the deep emotions of someone who loved but was left by the person they loved. It is a reflection of regret, longing, and memories of the past. The narrator looks back on the happy moments they shared with Celia and continues to think about and remember those joyful memories despite their separation. He tries to comfort himself by recalling the places and moments they shared, but his heart remains filled with sadness and longing. To the Reader. To the Reader is an introductory part of Florante et Laura written by Francisco Baltazar. In this section, Balagtas asks anyone who reads his poem to understand and reflect on it deeply. He admits that at first glance his work may seem harsh or unpolished, but with deeper understanding, it is full of lessons and value. He does not ask for praise, but rather for readers to approach it with an open mind, and not judge it immediately. He encourages readers to examine each line before forming an opinion, and advises against changing the verses, as Sigismundo did, which ruined a beautiful work by altering its words. Chapter 1. In the Dark Forest. This chapter describes a dense, dark, and terrifying forest filled with various dangers and sorrow. The forest has thorny bushes, huge trees that bring grief and sadness, and plants with painful thorns. The flowers on the trees have a mournful color that reflects the darkness of the surroundings. The forest is home to wild animals like serpents, basilisks, hyenas, and tigers, which threaten the life of anyone who gets lost there. This place is near the gates of the kingdom of Averno, ruled by Pluto, and is watered by the poisonous waters of the river Cocytus. Chapter 2. The Youth Tied to the Fig Tree. The poem describes a young man tied to a fig tree in the middle of a gloomy forest. He is compared to Adonis because of his handsomeness and impressive posture. Despite his good looks, he is bound and suffering due to the cruelty and evil in the world. The poem reflects the state of society where evil reigns, and goodness and truth are trampled upon. The young man symbolizes injustice, and his suffering mirrors the trials caused by human greed and wickedness. Chapter 3. Memories of Laura. The poem is about the sorrow of a man named Florante, who is imprisoned and suffering while remembering his beloved Laura. He asks the heavens where he can pour out his grievances, as it seems no one is listening to his cries. The memory of Laura serves as his only comfort and joy amidst his hardships. Although he thinks of their happy moments, he is troubled by the idea that Laura might already be in the arms of his enemy, Count Adolfo. The poem shows Florante's sadness and longing despite his bitter fate. Chapter 4. The Broken Heart. The poem is about Florante's deep sorrow after being betrayed by his beloved Laura. While tied to a tree, he expresses his pain, resentment, and memories of their love. He recalls how Laura once cared for and loved him deeply when they were together. But now those memories seem to have disappeared, and Laura has given her love to someone else. Despite everything, Florante continues to weep, feeling wounded and helpless as he accepts his tragic fate. Chapter 5. A Plea to Laura. The poem is a plea from Florante to Laura in the midst of his intense suffering and captivity in the forest. He feels extreme pain and sadness, hoping that Laura's love and care will ease his suffering. As he pleads for her help, he describes his condition: wounded, covered in blood, and in deep misery. Despite begging for help, he realizes that Laura is no longer with him. She has left him and given her heart to Count Adolfo. For Florante, Laura's betrayal and unfaithfulness hurt more than any physical pain he is experiencing. Chapter 6. The Arrival of Aladdin. Aladdin, a Moorish warrior from Persia, finds himself in a forest. While walking, he stops to rest and reflect. In his sadness and distress, he expresses his grievances, particularly about his beloved Florida, who has been taken from him. Aladdin deeply feels the pain of love and the betrayal of his father, who took Florida away. In his anguish, he decides to fight for his rights and stand against anyone who stands in the way of his love, even if it means going against his own father. Chapter 7. Florante remembers his father. This chapter shows Florante deeply grieving as he remembers his late father. Florante describes the suffering his father endured at the hands of Conde Adolfo, a treacherous and cruel enemy. He mourns the brutal death of his father and the injustice he faced. Florante feels immense pain and sadness over the loss of his father, whom he considered his protector and refuge. In the end, Florante wishes to be reunited with his father in the peaceful land of heaven. Chapter 8. Duke Briseo and Sultan Ali Adab. Florante briefly stops crying when he hears the sorrowful voice of a Moor who is telling a story about his father. While Florante cannot stop weeping because of his love for his father, Aladdin is sobbing because of his deep anger toward his own father. Florante's love for his father is profound, but Aladdin's anger toward his father is intense because he took away the only person Aladdin loved, Florida. Chapter 9. The Two Lions. The poem is about a man tied up and seemingly facing death in front of two lions who show him mercy. Although he expected the animals to be fierce, they seem to feel pity for his situation. The person in the poem grieves over his fate, especially because of the people he loved and served who seem to have forgotten him. While on the brink of death, he continues to remember his homeland, his beloved Laura, and his bitter fate, as if no one remembers him. Chapter 10. Aladdin and the Two Lions. The story revolves around Aladdin, a Moorish warrior who hears pitiful cries and weeping from the forest. Out of concern, he follows the voice and uses his blade to cut through thorns and bushes. When he arrives, he finds a man tied up and suffering, filled with tears and despair. As he observes the pitiful man, Aladdin notices two hungry lions ready to attack the tied-up person. Despite his fear, Aladdin quickly fights back. He shows his bravery and skill in combat, using his sword to save the victim from death at the hands of the fierce lions. Chapter 11. A Friend's Rescue. A brave warrior helps a friend who has fallen into a cruel situation after successfully fighting fierce animals. Out of deep pity and compassion, he cuts the strong rope binding his friend. He takes care of and supports his friend, hoping that his strength and life will return. When the friend wakes up, he immediately looks for Laura, his beloved, and then loses consciousness again. Fearing that his friend might not recover, the warrior waits for peace to return to his friend. Chapter 12. The Law of Heaven. The poem The Law of Heaven is about a Moorish warrior who saves an Albanian warrior from certain death at the hands of two fierce lions. Although their races and beliefs are enemies, the Moor shows a heart of compassion for others, following the law of heaven, which dictates that every person has a natural duty to care for others in times of need. The Albanian warrior, though safe, is not entirely happy because of the pain and sadness he feels. Chapter 13. Aladdin comforts Florante. In this chapter, we see Aladdin, a hero from Persia, caring for Florante, a Tagalog warrior. Both are in the midst of deep suffering. Aladdin is moved by compassion for Florante, who is wounded and weak. He takes care of Florante despite their differences in race and religion. Aladdin brings Florante to a clean place, feeds him, and helps him recover. While fulfilling his duty as a caregiver, Aladdin keeps watch all night to ensure Florante is safe from the wild animals in the forest. Gradually, with Aladdin's help, Florante regains his strength, but his deep sadness over lost love remains. Chapter 14. Florante's Childhood. This chapter contains Florante's memories from his early years to his growing up. Florante was born in Albania. He is the son of Duke Briseo and Princess Floresca. Duke Briseo is a duke and an advisor to the king, as well as a loving father to Florante. Florante shares his happy childhood memories, playing in the forest, archery, and enjoying nature. Despite his happy childhood, he also faced experiences that put his life in danger, such as nearly being snatched by a vulture, where he was saved by his cousin Menalipo. This chapter shows Florante's joyful childhood, as well as the love and protection of his family. It also highlights his deep connection to nature, which became a place of leisure and self-discovery for him. Chapter 15. Advice from Parents. The poem tells the story of parents advising their child about proper upbringing. It shows that a child raised in indulgence and constant happiness may grow up weak and unable to face life's challenges. The poem explains the importance of endurance and sacrifice to become strong in the face of life's difficulties. As an example, Florante was sent to Athens to learn resilience and not rely on luxury and pampering from his parents. Chapter 16. Adolfo's Deception. In this part, Florante shares his experience while studying in Athens, where he met Adolfo, a fellow countryman who seemed perfect and admired by everyone. However, despite Adolfo's good impression on others, Florante felt something unusual about Adolfo, a sense of unease and doubt about his true nature. Chapter 17. Adolfo's True Nature. This chapter is about Adolfo's true nature, which comes out when a challenge arises in Athens. At first, he only pretended to be good to gain the respect of others. When he noticed that Florante had surpassed him in knowledge, he began to feel jealous. Adolfo's jealousy led him to attempt to kill Florante during a school play. In the end, Adolfo's true nature was revealed. He was not truly kind, but filled with anger and envy toward Florante. Chapter 18. A Letter. This chapter describes the deep sadness and suffering of a son after receiving a letter from his father. The letter brought news of his mother's death, causing immense grief and emotional pain for the son. As he reads the letter, the son feels the pain and sorrow caused by his mother's passing, and he faints from the intensity of his emotions. When he wakes up, he continues to feel the pain, left alone in his grief, facing the bitter reality of losing a loved one. Chapter 19. Antenor's Advice. The poem Antenor's Advice describes Florante's farewell to his teacher, Antenor, before returning to Albania. A letter from his father arrived, ordering him to come home, so he bid goodbye to his maestro. Antenor gave him important advice, including being cautious of Count Adolfo, who was described as a secret enemy. He advised Florante to be observant, watch out for people who show kindness but have bad intentions, and prepare for any challenges that may come. During their farewell, everyone felt deep sadness, especially Menandro, Florante's close friend, who accompanied him to the port to say goodbye. Chapter 20. Florante's Return to Albania. This chapter tells the story of Florante's return to Albania after his journey. He immediately went to his father's house, but instead of joy, he felt deep sadness because of his mother's death. He was greeted with a hug and tears from his father, showing their shared grief. An ambassador from Crotona arrived, bringing news that Crotona was under siege by an enemy and asking for help. The enemy army was led by General Osmalik, a famous warrior from Persia. During this time, Florante and Amor briefly exchanged views about the truthfulness of stories regarding the bravery of warriors. Chapter 21. The General of the Army. The poem tells the story of Florante, a young hero who is brought by his father to the palace of the king of Crotona. Upon their arrival, they are greeted by the king, who is happy and expresses admiration for Florante, considering him a brave warrior who will defend the land of Crotona against the Moors. The king gives him the responsibility of becoming the general of the army, a huge task that comes with challenges due to his young age and lack of experience in war. Although hesitant, Florante accepts the king's command out of respect for the order and to fulfill the duty of their lineage. Chapter 22. Laura. This chapter talks about Florante's deep feelings of love for Laura, a maiden whose beauty rivals the stars in the sky. Laura is the daughter of King Linceo, and her beauty causes intense longing and suffering for those who love her. Florante, who loves Laura, grieves over his heartbreak and wonders why heaven allowed him to see Laura if he was not worthy of her. The poem shows the struggle of emotions in facing the harsh reality of betrayal and failure in love. Chapter 23. A Heart in Love. The poem describes the complicated experience of someone in love, filled with confusion and sorrow. During a grand 3-day feast at the king's palace, the narrator feels overwhelmed by his emotions and struggles to express himself because of the weight of his love. Despite his high status, he suffers from the pain of unfulfilled hope in his affection. On a rare occasion, he speaks with the princess he loves, where he pours out his deep feelings of love, resentment, and sadness. Although his love is not returned, The princess comforts him with a symbol of hope, tears that carry meaning, proving that their meeting held deep emotions and was not easily forgotten. His love remains unfulfilled, but he finds some relief in the princess's gesture. Chapter 24. The Battle of Florante's Army. In this poem, Florante recounts his battle in Crotona. He said goodbye to his beloved Laura to go to war. He was filled with sadness and longing, but continued for the sake of his duty. In the battle, he faced the cruel General Osmalik and fought fiercely. After a long and dangerous fight, Florante killed Osmalik, and his army triumphed over the enemy. Upon their return, they were welcomed by the king and the people of Crotona, full of gratitude. However, despite the victory, Florante was reminded of his grief over his mother's death, showing him that there is no perfect happiness in the world. Chapter 25. Saving the people of Albania. After staying in Crotona for 5 months, Florante decided to return to Albania because of his love for Laura. Upon his return, he saw the flag of the Moors occupying his land, led by Aladdin. While traveling, Florante encountered a group of Moors carrying a bound woman they planned to behead. Fearing it might be Laura, he quickly attacked the enemies. After defeating them, he approached the captive and discovered it was indeed Laura. Laura was being punished for refusing the love of a Moorish emir, which led to her mistreatment and cruelty. When Florante freed Laura, their love was rekindled. Chapter 26. The Betrayal of Count Adolfo. The poem The Betrayal of Count Adolfo describes the events where Florante, the main character, is freed from prison and helps the king of Albania and his father. However, Count Adolfo, who is deeply jealous of Florante's success and fame, plans a treacherous move to seize the crown and marry Laura. In the end, Adolfo succeeds in his deceit, kills the king and Florante's father, and forces Laura to marry him. Florante is imprisoned and falls into deep sorrow upon learning what has happened. Chapter 27. Aladdin's Story. Aladdin, a prince from Persia and the son of Sultan Ali Adab, shares his sad experiences with Florante in the middle of the forest. His suffering began because of his love for Florida, a beautiful princess considered one of the most admired women in their kingdom. Out of jealousy and anger, his father, the Sultan, punished him by imprisoning him and later ordering his execution. Instead of being killed, Aladdin was banished from Persia and sent away as a form of punishment. For 6 years, he wandered through different places, filled with pain and longing for his beloved Florida. Chapter 28. Florida's Story. In this chapter, Florida shares her story of sacrifice and love. When she found out that her beloved, who was imprisoned, was about to be executed, she begged the king to spare his life. Despite her strong resistance, she was forced to accept the king's love in exchange for saving her beloved. After her beloved was freed, the king ordered her to leave the city and go to another land. Soon after, Florida decided to escape, disguised herself as a warrior, and left the palace to search for her beloved. After years of traveling through mountains and forests, she arrived at the place where she saved Laura from Adolfo's evil plans. Chapter 29. Florida saves Laura. Amidst the chaos, Florante and Aladdin arrive, interrupting the conversation between Laura and Florida. The lovers Florante and Laura reunite, and because of this, the sadness of the forest disappears, turning it into a paradise of joy. While talking, Laura recounts what happened in the kingdom of Albania after Florante left. Adolfo started the chaos and killed King Lincio and his council. When Adolfo took over the kingdom, he tried to force Laura to love him, but she refused. Hoping for Florante's return, Laura tried to write to him, but the letter fell into Adolfo's hands. When Adolfo attempted to take advantage of Laura in the forest, an arrow from Florida's bow ended Adolfo's life, saving Laura. Chapter 30. The Ending. In this chapter, Menandro arrived in the forest with his army to search for Adolfo. When he reunited with Florante, it brought great joy and happiness. After returning to the kingdom, the weddings of Florante and Laura, as well as Aladdin and Florida, were celebrated, and both couples were baptized. Sultan Ali Adab passed away, allowing Aladdin to return to Persia, while Florante became the king of Albania. Under his leadership, the kingdom became peaceful, and the people lived successfully and prosperously. And that concludes the summary of each chapter of Florante at Laura. If you found this lesson helpful, we encourage you to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay updated on our future videos. Until next time, thank you for watching.